P&O Ferries, enacting policies that are pretty despicable, just to try and save a bit of money. So P&O Ferries, who I think we're all aware of, should have seen the adverts at some point on the telly or something, but they have recently come under a lot of fire because they've sacked a huge number of their employees. I think I've got my notes in front of me here. I think it's about 800 seafaring staff were sacked over Zoom, right? And that's already pretty harsh. But then it gets worse. They were sacked with no consultation, no prior warning, and they're now being replaced with cheaper agency staff. And these agency staff are cheaper, obviously, because they have lower pay and they have fewer rights as well. That tends to be the way it is when companies will start to go through agencies. So this is an example of fire and rehire-ish. Right? It's not fire and rehire. Fire and rehire, if you're not aware, is the policy where a company will sack loads of its employees, terminate their employment, because those employees maybe they've unionized and are asking for better pay, or maybe the company just doesn't want to have to fork out some of the money that's going to the executives if they're under hard times. So instead of those guys taking a pay cut, they sack all of the regular employees, and then they hire a bunch of new people, or even rehire the same people with lower pay, often worse working conditions, often more unfair hours. But in this instance, the company isn't sort of directly doing that. The employment isn't directly between the worker and P&O. They're going through an agency, right? So it's slightly different, but the principle is exactly the same. The government promised an employment bill over 2 years ago, right, which would boost workers' rights. And that bill is absolutely nowhere to be seen. Absolutely nowhere to be seen. What we have seen from this government is, like I said before, earlier on in the show, increases in national insurance. So working people have less money in their pockets. We've seen terrible inaction when it comes to mitigating the cost of living crisis. The Chancellor doing hardly anything, telling people they can take out loans with the government, which they're obviously going to have to pay back in the future at some point. Those loans won't even cover the increases in bills. This government obviously has also criminalised peaceful protest in various circumstances, and now people are somehow shocked that the government hasn't done anything to improve workers' rights. It's really, I mean, it's expected. Is the word, unfortunately. The government haven't taken any strong action on this. Surprisingly, Labour have been pretty good on this, and there's certainly much to be desired from the Labour Party at the moment, from Keir Starmer, from Rachel Reeves, from the whole of the party. But the policy on fire and rehire and its sort of slightly different sort of doppelgangers is pretty good. Labour wants to outlaw that, and they'd also kind of take P&O to task on that, potentially with with investigations, potentially legal action. But at the end of the day, if it were me, if I was Prime Minister, I'd probably nationalise the company, in all honesty, because I think fundamentally the problem here is that this is a company that works based on achieving profits and massive salaries and bonuses for a small handful of very wealthy executives. They don't have any material reason to care about their employees. You nationalise it, you bring it into democratic public ownership, then I think you can start to change things, because suddenly you've taken the profit motive out of that. But then, of course, you can turn large companies into worker cooperatives so that you've got joint ownership, all the employees on a little piece of the pie, and they kind of run it democratically, and that's a much fairer way of doing business, and usually co-ops are more resistant to economic hardship. There's lots of different ways that we can kind of create a better economy where this kind of thing doesn't happen. But banning fire and rehire and all of its slightly different variants is a good step in that direction. So yeah, really a kind of disgusting instance. Yeah, and the government, of course, has given out massive public contracts to P&O, and that has to absolutely stop immediately.